This is Your Brain in the Cybersex Jungle. My name is Gary Wilson. This show contains adult themes, so please send the kids away. Disclaimer time, the Your Brain in Cybersex Jungle show is informational only. It is not medical advice. If you need medical advice, please see your doctor. The central theme of the show is how internet pornography impacts men, usually young men, their experiences, and the science behind what they are experiencing. If you want to know more, you can visit www.yourbrainonporn.com. It has video presentations, lots of articles, lots of information, links to forums and such. Today we have a guest. His name is Brian McDougall, and he has written a brand new book called Porned Out: Erectile Dysfunction, Depression, and 7 More Selfish Reasons to Quit Porn. It's quite a nice book. It's easy to understand. It's well laid out. And before we ask him to come on, I'll go ahead and just mention a little introduction here. Here's what the author says inspired the book. After personal experience with porn addiction and a tumultuous 18 months of working to stay off it for good, I decided to write a book about the negative effects of pornography can have on one's life. It is my hope that it can get some people to fully consider the effect of their porn use is having on their lives. You know why you shouldn't smoke, eat fast food, or drink excessive amounts of alcohol, but do you know why porn is bad for you? Brian, are you there?
I'm here, Gary.
Okay. Can you hear okay?
I can hear you fine. Can you hear me well?
Yes, I can. So my first question, and it's a big one, what is the book about?
That is a big one. Essentially, it is about the user of pornography himself, how the pornography is going to affect him. The underlying theme of the book is all about the changes to the brain that are going to occur as you use pornography, and it dips a little bit into kind of the chemicals that are involved. It talks about dopamine a little bit, nothing highly technical, but the focus is on the actual things, the symptoms that you can see, the depression, the erectile dysfunction, sleep problems, memory problems, concrete things like that people may be feeling right now, but not having any idea why.
Well, that's quite surprising. You know, most people who hear about porn use would not assume that such problems such as depression or erectile dysfunction or sleep problems or even concentration or memory problems would be associated with porn use. But that's what you discovered in your investigations.
Yeah, and I gotta say for myself, it was absolutely staggering to me when I learned this. I mean, I had been using pornography myself since, 15 years old or maybe even younger than that, and I had some of these problems myself. I was dealing with depression, sleep problems, and other things, but I had never connected any of that to pornography, and I had never heard anyone even try to do so. There's a lot of people out there that will try to tell you why you shouldn't use pornography, but in most cases, it's going to boil down to religious arguments, social arguments, feminist arguments, which are all valid in their own right. But it seems like until recently, nobody really focused on what it does to the person using the pornography. When I started digging into that and looking at what can actually happen, some of these things I almost didn't want to put in there because I wasn't sure if people would believe them.
Yeah, I noticed that too. On my site, I have a lot of information, and we were surprised and shocked by all the benefits that these men experienced when they gave up porn. The studies today don't get at that. They don't ask the right questions, and you can't get at it. The only way you can get at it, in my opinion, is to actually change the single variable, and that is to remove it, and that's to remove porn, and then see what happens. That's the only valid experiment, I think. So you decided to write this book. So what's your story? What's behind it?
That's a bit of a story, actually. Both, I guess, the answer to the question why I decided to write this book and why I decided to write this book, which is, two different things. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, you quoted from the book, I had a problem with pornography use myself, and it was getting to a point where it was serious enough that I got a wake-up call. I had to do something about it. when I started researching, I bumped into the subreddit Nofap, and I bumped into Your Brain on Porn and other sites that are now out there. That's where I saw all these effects that it can have, and I did the 3-month run that they like to do on Nofap. I've been daying off pretty well now for about 18 months. At the same time, always reading up, trying to find out more. And some time ago, I decided I wanted to write a book to help people that knew they were addicts to give it up. So I started doing research for that, and I realized there's a lot of excellent books for that out there already.
Yes.
Many which are written by therapists or neurologists, psychologists, other extremely qualified people. I believe you've had some of them on your show already. You interviewed the author of The Porn Trap.
Yes.
And there are some other very good books out there. I list some of them on the website for the book. We can go into that later, maybe. The long and short of it is that I decided there was nothing I could add to that category. I had no unique information that would benefit people that knew they had addiction and already wanted to give it up. However, what I realized was that all these books had the same starting point, and it was exactly that. You know you're addicted, and you know you want to give it up, but there was very little literature on why should you do that in the first place. If you haven't already bumped into the problem, if you haven't already accepted that you have a problem with porn use, you may never have considered whether it could be causing you some ill effect or not. And that's where this book is to fill the gap. It's to show people that may not have considered this before that they do have a compulsive problem, or at least they may be suffering ill effect with their use, whether it's compulsive or not. And to get them just to think about both now and in the future to kind of monitor their use and monitor what effects it could be having on them to see if this is something that they need to be worried about or not.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is that many guys do not know how the porn use is affecting them until they stop it. And often what gets most of them to stop it is erectile dysfunction. Mm-hmm. For them, they often hit erectile dysfunction maybe in their early 20s, and so they've been using porn for 10, 12, 15 years. So your book is really about what you don't know is occurring until you stop. Like the heading of the chapters are, porn makes you depressed, porn use escalates and spins out of control, porn use kills your concentration, porn use interferes with your sleep, porn use degrades your relationships. So if you never stop using porn, you wouldn't know that happened because you don't know what life is like without porn use. Is that the basic concept?
That's the basic concept, and it is my hope that by reading the book, you can realize that some of these problems that might be starting to develop in your life are because of porn, without you having to hit a really serious problem or get in trouble with your relationships, your employer, or even the law, before you start looking at this and saying, is this something I need to give up?
So you're not religious, are you? You don't come from this from a moral standpoint, correct?
I'm not particularly religious myself, no. But, I do respect the opinion of those that have a religious foundation for not wanting to use pornography. But it was very strongly my intention to keep religion and any kind of subjective opinions out of this and try to base it as much as possible on what the research is showing us that is actually happening.
Yeah, most people assume that if you are suggesting that porn's a problem, that you have some type of religious or moral reason. We get hit with that a lot. Now, I just want to point out that not everyone will experience all these symptoms or even any of these symptoms. It's just, a warning that, in fact, it can happen. So in your investigations, you were on these sites such as Reddit, Nofap, or other sites. What was surprising to you that you discovered reading these stories over the last 18 months or so?
I guess the most surprising factor to me was how quickly most people get relief from nearly all these issues after giving up pornography. Yeah. It's really boggles the mind. Even people that were struggling with some of these problems for decades even, and then in a matter of weeks or months, most of the things that were plaguing them would just clear up.
Yeah, and that's what's been surprising. One thing I would mention to people listening, especially those on Nofap or other places, that some of them will compare themselves to others, and some people get benefits within the first few weeks. However, a lot who have had a severe addiction will go into what's called a flat line, where they have loss of libido and they're depressed, and it takes, for some, several months to come out of that and start to feel normal again. Did you experience that, a drop in libido and sort of a flatness after you gave up porn?
No, I personally experienced very few of the negative things that people sometimes describe happen after they give up pornography. But, I mean, you're right in saying, and it is absolutely true, that a lot of people experience some negative things first after they give it up, and they kind of need to work their way over the hump. For a lot of people, it is going to get worse before it gets better, but I don't know anyone that has ever regretted going through that and breaking through to the other side.
Yeah, I mean, we see the benefits all the time. Now, you have this specialized book. How do you think it can help people, if you were to summarize this?
There's two ways. One of them was kind of the basic approach of the book was, of course, to get people to look at these things before they become really bad, before they become very deeply depressed, before they lose spouses or become completely unable to maintain an erection, and tackle the problem at that point while it's still a lot easier to deal with. The second way that I've seen that it helps people, and this is just based on feedback from people that have read it, I did not anticipate this at all, is when either partners or people that do not have these problems themselves have read the book. They say it tends to explain a lot for them. A colleague of mine recently read the book, and she is single now, but she's had a number of relationships before, and after she read the book, she came up to me and told me, you know what, this explains so many of the problems in my past relationships. I feel a lot better about how I handle stuff now, and I realize it's not my fault.
Well, that's huge, because my site and Nofap Reddit and others are really for the guys to sit around and talk to each other about their problems. And occasionally women will show up and their boyfriend or their husband is having a problem, and they perceive it as their fault because the guy's looking at porn, he can't stop, so there must be something wrong with her, when in fact it's an addiction. So this is great that it can actually help those partners understand what's going on. And you get into some of the science, the dopamine, and how it is affected. Could you describe how dopamine may be affected through severe porn use?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just a tiny bit first for those that don't really know what dopamine does in the brain. Dopamine is that neurochemical that tells you, basically is your brain telling you what it would like you to do and what feels good to it. So if you're hungry and you eat, you get a release of dopamine. Even if you just think about eating while you're hungry, your brain is giving you a release of dopamine to tell you, yes, I would like that, do that, please. Of course, your brain is attuned to natural reinforcers, as they're called, which includes eating, sleeping, and of course sex. So when you have normal sex, or think about having normal sex, your brain is going to release a certain amount of dopamine, which activates everything in your body that tries to get you to have sex with people. Now, when you watch pornography, it kind of hijacks that same signal. Pornography is such a supercharged version of that same sexual stimuli that we're attuned to respond to, that your brain releases just a torrent of dopamine. It releases so much more than normal sex ever could. When you got this high-definition video streaming on your screen and you switch every few seconds getting a new partner, which increases the stimulation a lot more, you release much, much more dopamine than your brain was really made to tolerate on a continual basis. And when you do this for multiple hours, many days a week, then eventually what's going to happen is that the brain and the nerves in your body are going to defend themselves. They're going to become less sensitive to dopamine. And this is really bad news, because if you have a brain that's less sensitive to dopamine, it means that the ability for your brain to tell you, okay, this thing is good, you're happy about this, you want to do this kind of thing, whether it's sex or whether it's food or again, sleeping or watching TV, whatever it is you like to do, that signal is going to become much, much weaker. This is how pornography ties into depression, because you're going to be much less driven to do anything, you're going to be listless and apathetic, and these things are pretty much the definition of being depressed. And everything else in the book kind of derives from this. the reason that porn use escalates is because of this desensitization to dopamine. The reason you become forgetful and lose your concentration is because how the brain changes when you get this overload of dopamine all the time. And everything else too, even the erectile dysfunction, is essentially prolonged overload of dopamine. So when you stop subjecting your brain to that amount of dopamine on a regular basis, basically when you give up the porn and you stop watching the porn, then the brain can kind of fix itself again, and your nerves see that it's safe to become more sensitive to dopamine. This is the reason that, in a matter of months, you can get relief from pretty much all these issues.
Yeah, and that's a great explanation. Also, what happens is there's a wiring that occurs, I believe, in that guys need a certain, not only is there low dopamine, but they get used to sitting and watching and clicking. So sex becomes that. So it's like conditioning. It's like Pavlovian conditioning. So when sex doesn't match sitting and watching and clicking and fast forwarding, it doesn't get them excited. So I think that's another piece of it too. It all works together. You mentioned concentration, and just 2 days ago I found a new study that just came out that actually supported this. It's called Pornographic Picture Processing Interferes with Working Memory Performance. What it is a new study where they had guys look at porn pictures, and their ability to concentrate, their ability to remember things, their ability to function and think was inhibited. And these are guys who weren't addicted, so just even watching porn can affect your processing. You mentioned escalation. Now, how would you describe escalation to a novice, someone who doesn't understand what it's like in porn, in internet porn, that is?
Escalation is essentially the effect where you start needing more volume and more emotional impact from the pornography. Maybe the best allegory would be to say that if you're addicted to drugs, escalation is needing more frequent hits, bigger hits to get the same effect. So if you're addicted to pornography, or even, I guess you don't need to be addicted for this to happen, the escalation happens gradually over a very long time. For me, the escalation was described by starting out at the days where the internet was pretty much the IRC and BBSs, and I would be able to download a few images every week. The images would be black and white, every now and then color, of a single woman either in a bikini or naked. And at the time, that was plenty for me. That was absolutely fine. Just before I gave it up, I was streaming high-definition videos in multiple tabs of all kinds of hardcore, obscene things that were going on, sexual acts that I didn't even know existed back when I started using pornography. Some acts that didn't even have that much to do with sex anymore. And basically, what you start to need is you need more novelty. You might need something that is in some way disgusting. You need something that is dangerous. You need something that gives you that tension, that feeling of emotional impact. And if you take it far enough, you will almost always end up with an addiction to something that is either illegal or completely repugnant to other people, and sometimes even yourself. I don't know how many men I talked to on these support groups that said that as soon as they closed the link, they closed the tab and they were done with the pornography for the day, they were completely disgusted with themselves for the kind of videos they were watching. It was something that said they had no interest in real life participating in that sort of action, but it was what they needed to get off on the pornography, because the longer they'd been using it, the further and further they had to go.
Yes, we see that a lot, that escalation. What's interesting is when the guys stop, over weeks to months, they see a reversal of their taste, and then they end up at the place they were before they used porn, their sexual taste. It's very interesting to see that reversal.
Which is actually fantastic, because, I mean, this escalation, it tends to bleed over into your personal life, into your sexual life as well. So for those that are married or have even just short-term partners, the partners usually pick up on this quite nicely, because the pornography user will gradually, when he quits, he will become much more interested in normal sex. He will start to find his own partner much more attractive, much sexier than before, because he doesn't have the weight of the porn kind of pushing all that down.
Now, did that happen to you? Do you find yourself more interested in your partner?
Oh, absolutely. absolutely.
And
me and my wife were in a fairly troubled spot when all this began, or, when I started realizing all this. And since then, things have gotten a lot better in pretty much every which way in the relationship, sexually and outside the bedroom.
Great. It's interesting because so few, maybe only about 10% of the men I see on these forums or Nofap or Your Brain More Balanced are in a relationship. So you're in a unique place. Do you think being in a relationship makes it easier to give up porn?
I think it helps. A lot of the guys that I've talked to that have been considering whether they should join like the Nofap challenge on Reddit or not, they become very hesitant if they don't have partners. They tend to think it's just not possible because an aspect of that is not to masturbate at all, not just to not use pornography for 3 months. And obviously that is going to be considerably easier when you have someone to help you out.
Well, here's a concept for them. How about if they continue to masturbate and just give up porn? That's what I don't ever get. I'm an old guy, 56, and I'm just like, just give up porn. But that's just me.
I suggested that to a few guys, and it's very interesting to see the look on their faces when you say that. They're like, yeah, I guess that's possible. I never thought about that before. I mean, masturbation and pornography has become so intertwined with people today that most guys have just never thought that they could do it without pornography.
Yeah, that's what's shocking to me is that they use one word for the same thing. They call it fapping, and they say, oh, that's masturbation to porn. And we even have a frequently asked question on our site is, can you masturbate without porn? That's just an unbelievable question to me. I just can't even conceive of it, but we had to create it. I want to ask you, how's the reception been so far on your new book?
The reception has been very good. Everyone that has read the book and talked to me has been happy about seeing this information, because for most people, they've never really thought about things this way, and they're seeing this information for the first time. And, of course, people say that that's great for them to know that. To me, this is like finally figuring out that smoking can be harmful to people. And I allude to that a few times in the book. There was a whole generation of people, well, 2 generations of people, I guess, that had no idea that smoking was harmful. I kind of see what we're trying to do here as, something very similar. I'm not saying pornography is as harmful as smoking, not by any means, but this is something that is very common now. Everybody does it, and people generally don't know it's harmful.
Yeah, and some doctors actually suggested smoking for people to help with their respiratory problems back in the 30s and 40s. Right. And I've seen some sexologists actually suggest using porn to help with people's sex lives, maybe in the short run, but the long run, I'm not so sure. So we're about down to about 1 minute. Is there anything else you would like to mention before we close?
I think maybe I would like to direct a few words towards those that are trying to get other people to give up pornography. And what I think is really important if you're trying to do that is to focus on the benefit for that person. There were so many people before who had tried to tell me why I should give it up, why pornography was bad, but it was always easy to kind of hand wave and dismiss it because people never told me why I should care. Well, what are my personal reasons? That is exactly what this book is trying to do. It's telling you, okay, this is how it affects you. Hence, me using the word selfish reasons in the title, because this is all just things that make your own life better if you give up pornography.
That's a great answer. So today we've been talking with Brian McDougall. He is the author of a brand new book called Porned Out, Erectile Dysfunction, Depression, and 7 More Selfish Reasons to Quit Porn. It's a great book.